Hello and welcome. So the final episode of Mammals is called Forests, and as you'd expect, it's about forests and the mammals that live there. So this episode opens up with tigers. So we see a little bit of tigers. It's basically this tiger trying to hunt some deer. It doesn't catch it, and that's kind of it. We will circle back to tigers later in the episode, but for now, that's all we get. All you need to know though is the footage is stunning and it's a great way to set up the episode, I think. So after that, we see chimpanzees. Chimpanzees are an animal that we see a lot in these programs. To be honest, at a point I was getting a bit fed up seeing them. I kind of feel like I've seen everything they do, despite the fact that they're animals that are very close to us. They are our closest living relatives. They also have a lot of very interesting behaviour. They're very intelligent. Still though, I feel like I had seen most of what they have to offer. So in this sequence, we see a male gathering honey from some underground bees, and it's quite a good sequence. You just see it, fishing the honey out using sticks, but it's when all the other chimps are gathering round to try to get a bit of the honey, and he's just not giving it over to them. That's great, especially this one. I think it's a female, just kind of eyeing up the honey right next to his hand, basically. Great stuff, quite funny. After that, though, we see chimps hunting monkeys. So this is a sequence we've seen so many times before. When I mean chimps have been done to death, this is the kind of sequence I mean. And I feel like it was fine. It was a different species of monkey, red-capped mangabeys, I believe. Usually it's colobus monkeys we see them hunting. So that was cool, I guess. And it's still filmed very well, it's still great shots and everything. But again, I've seen that before. It's not one of the parts of the episode that I think will stay with me, to be honest. But it was still good, still well filmed, and to be fair, it has been a while since we've seen that type of behaviour, so I'll give them that. After that, we see tenrecs. So tenrecs are an animal that I don't think we've ever seen in these programs. Maybe in Madagascar, but I don't think that many people saw that series, and it was like 2011, I think, so quite a while. But the tenrecs are pretty good. We just see them foraging around, looking for stuff. One young tenrec wanders off, and his mother tries to call it back by vibrating these spines they've got at their rear. Yeah, cool, I didn't know that. I think tenrecs are quite interesting because their anatomy is quite unique. They actually have cloacas, which is interesting, very rare for mammals. Then we see bobcats. So the bobcat is hunting salmon, just to get out of the way. Bobcats hunting salmon is not something I thought I'd ever see. I didn't think bobcats could catch salmon because, as the episode states, salmon are pretty massive. And bobcats, especially the one we see in the series, isn't that big. Comparing a bobcat and a bear, for instance, bears catching salmon seems totally normal. Bobcats, not so much. It takes a while for it to catch them. But when it does, it's great. I think that's a sequence that, again, I didn't really anticipate seeing. So the Siberian squirrels were next. Siberian squirrels, basically I'm going to call them flying squirrels because that's what they are. So we see flying squirrels just basically gliding between trees. A sequence that we have seen once before in Life of Mammals. I feel like there are a lot of things in this series from the Life of Mammals that we have revisited in this series. And because it's been such a long time, it's been like 22 years since that series came out, there's a lot of time for technology to have improved, and while we are seeing the same thing, basically, we are getting a more in-depth look. And I think the sequence is great. We didn't really need to see the flying squirrels do anything amazing, I just needed to see them flying around, or gliding around, rather. We did get quite a funny sequence of the young flying squirrels trying to leave the nest, and some of them take to fly away. Others just hide back in the little hole they were hiding in. That's great. It was quite a funny sequence. And yeah, again, I liked that a lot. Then we see howler monkeys. So they're another animal that we haven't seen really since Life of Mammals. But here we see the howler monkeys just foraging through the trees. And because the forests are pretty fragmented, they have to cross power lines to get to them because they're travelling through a town, basically. And that's a great sequence. Again, this episode does have more of an environmental focus than previous episodes. And this sequence was probably the best example. We see that some howler monkeys just don't make it, some of them get electrocuted. So I really felt that this was a very intense sequence. I was very much waiting for every howler monkey to make it to the other side. Well, that was great. Then we get the fruit bats. So the straw-coloured fruit bat migration is the largest gathering of mammals anywhere in the world. I feel like this series said that was the Mexican free-tail bats back in episode 1. So I maybe need to check that again, but I feel like this is more accurate to that. So it is massive. I mean, there's loads of bats. We do get a funny bit where the bats just pee on each other. That's quite funny. But it's a really grand spectacle. I feel like seeing all these bats would be a pretty cool thing. And then we also see that because, humans tear down the forests, we build our cities and build our towns. There isn't that much space for the bats anymore, and seeing the bats just flying amongst the buildings was really effective. The fact that it was raining and there was light in the background made it feel more forbidden, but I think that was a great sequence. To be honest, they could have ended with the fruit bats. I think that would have been a great sequence to end on. We don't, but it's still pretty good. After that, we can look at lions. So the lions are basically having to adapt to a much hotter and drier world. climate change is kind of touched on here, and how there's a lot of droughts. And we touch on how certain species of trees and other plants are able to adapt more to this environment. We touch on how these lions have adapted to their new environment by actually climbing trees. They spend quite a lot of time in the trees, and they use them to ambush their prey. It's quite a good sequence. Then we circle back to where we started with the tigers. So we see the tiger continuing its hunt. It basically stalks some deer that are in a lake, basically just basking and feeding on the vegetation, and it has to hunt them in the water. And because the water's so deep, it's not really able to do so. So then it has to drive one onto the land to catch it. It's a really good sequence. Tigers are pretty great, to be honest. They just lend themselves to great filmmaking. They are spectacular animals. I think they're one of the few animals that everyone knows, apart from the people that confuse them with lions, which I'll never understand, to be honest. We do end with the tiger cubs. We talk about how Bengal tigers have done a lot better in recent years. They've done really well, especially in the last 20 years. And I think that's a really good thing to touch on. I feel like if we're going to end on a positive note, a conservation success story is probably Bengal tigers. They're an animal that we're all aware was endangered and is still endangered. But we see people, especially people who live in the country, especially people in India, have kind of come together to protect them. And then we get the diaries. So the diaries is about the howler monkeys. It's not so much about people filming the howler monkeys, it's about the people that work and protect them. The women that ran that organisation, which was basically helping the howler monkeys, they build these walkways for them to cross from tree to tree. This sequence was, again, a very good way of ending it, because her message as well was really good, basically telling people to reconnect with nature and try and help it. That's always a good message, I think, so that's not a bad thing at all. So this episode was pretty good. I think it was definitely better than last week. It continued what this series had, which was about adaptability. Had a bit more environmental stuff in it, but that wasn't an issue for me. Highlights for me were probably the tigers, to be honest. Fruit bats, the tenrecs. Basically everything in here was great, to be honest. So yeah, there wasn't really any weak points for me. This series as a whole has been pretty great. I think the series has had a very good focus on adaptability, which is very refreshing. While this episode had a bit more of an environmental focus, the series hasn't had that overall, and because most series have that, I feel like in recent years the impact they've had hasn't been as effective. So it was kind of nice to back off a little bit and just talk about something else, which I think is nice. So this series was great. I really liked it. So what did you think of this episode? Did you like it? What were your highlights? And what did you think of the series as a whole? What were your favourite episodes? What were your favourite bits? So next week I will be doing my top 10 highlights of the series Mammals, as I have done for Planet Earth 3 and Planet Earth 2. And since this series is over, what would you like me to do next? What series would you like to tackle next? I will be resuming my Planet Earth reviews, which I think will be the desert episode is the next one I've got. So if you're interested, look forward to that. And as ever, feel free to like, comment and subscribe on this video. You don't have to. See you next week for my top 10 moments video, and see you then, and goodbye.